that night I had this whole experiment going that the 14th one finally said yes. But here's what's funny about it. I learned that women have 3 ways of saying no to you, okay? The first one is the polite no. No, thank you. Don't want to dance. Not my song. The second one is no. That's stern no. And then the third level of no, which is probably the harshest, is where they simply just walk away from you or ignore you, right? And how does this relate to sales? Sales, is different. You go after something, and you're going to get rejected. You're going to get nice no's. You're going to get not so nice no's, and you're going to get very rude no's. But should that stop you, Richard?
Definitely not.
Absolutely. So what you do is you keep going after it until you're successful. You've heard of the law of averages or the law of probabilities. It works in your favor. But the problem is a lot of us just give up. There was a statistic that also came out that talked about 2% of all sales are made on the first call. 3% of all sales are made on the second call. 5% of the sales are made on the third call. 10%, Richard, are made on the fourth call. And then 80%, Richard, of all sales are made on the fifth call. Now think about
Wow.
that. How many people do you think actually make that fifth call?
Exactly. I think that's where a lot of people stop.
They stop right there. Out of that, they said 48% of people give up after the first phone call. 48% give up after their first phone call, Richard. 25 give up after the second phone call. Now, just stop right there. 48 give up after the first, 25 give up after the second. That's almost 75% who give up after the second phone call. Now, is that good news or bad news, Richard?
Well, good news for me, bad news for them.
Hey, you got it. That's right. For those who give up, it's bad news for them. If you understand these numbers, it's good news. That means 75% of your competition drops out after the first 2 phone calls. 12% give up after the third phone call. 5% give up after the fourth phone call. And here's where the true sales champions lie. 10% keep calling after more than 5 times. And that's where you're going to see success. A lot of people just give up. When you look at numbers in general about sales, they say most people fail within the first year. I think that the statistic is somewhere in the 80 percentile. 80% will fail in their first year for one very simple reason, Richard. Lack of prospecting. Lack of going out there and actually initiating the phone calls. That's why I think most people fail in business and in sales.
That's excellent. Again, I'll keep referring back to myself. I can't speak for others. Having been in sales for the majority of my adult life, you often wonder, you take a step back and you wonder, well, gosh, why is Bill and Mary and Sam and Ted not making it? And I think you just outlined a perfect reason why. And statistics are great to follow and something that I think all of us need to acknowledge. But being able to take those statistics and apply them to ourselves and use that as a motivator and say, hey, this is I know what the statistics are. They're stacked against me, so here's what I need to do to overcome it. Perfect. Great information. This is getting into some I want to say controversial issues. There's so much going around nowadays about setting goals. We often hear about setting goals. What's your take on goal setting?
Goal setting is one of those things that when I do my speaking or I train, as soon as I say the word goals, everybody rolls their eyes at me because nobody wants to hear about them anymore. They've been talked to death. And I always tell people that, goals are nasty. And they always ask, well, what do you mean they're nasty? And I said, goals are nasty reminders of a promise you made that you're about to break. And what I mean by that is that when you ask people, did you write your goals down, Richard, most likely you're going to get the answer, no, I have it up here. And they'll point to their brain, right? Like, I got it up here. Don't worry about it. The reason they don't write it down is because they don't want to be reminded of a commitment they've made that they know they're going to break. Nobody wants it in writing. You know what I mean? If you talk to people about goals, nobody wants to write it down. And so here, let's take this example. What happens at the end of the year, every year, throughout the world, almost, is that at the end of the year, for example, we all make that commitment around Christmas that this coming year is the year that I'm going to make the resolution that I'm going to get in shape. You've heard that before, right, Richard?
No, never. Not that one.
2000X, this is the year that I'm going to get in shape. So what happens? They make that commitment, that New Year's resolution. That first week, they'll go out there and they'll sign up for that, that gym club, that membership, to get into the gyms, right? But what they'll say then is like, well, okay, good, I signed up. This is a great first step, but, it's winter here in Atlanta or Minnesota, whatever it may be. Maybe I'll start in February, okay? So what they do is they rationalize that they should start in February. So then February rolls around, and instead of getting into it in February, said, well, this month I'm really busy. I probably have a lot of work on my mind. I got to take this vacation. I can't keep delaying this. I'll start working out in March. So they rationalize and they move it out to March. Now, you know what happens, Richard. They keep rationalizing all the way to the end of the year, and when they look back, they realize they haven't done anything. And then the cycle of madness begins again, because in December they'll make some new resolutions, right? Now,
as you're saying this, I'm sure glad that I've never ever done that myself.
I bet you haven't. I have. But it's funny. I always tell people, did you ever take the word rationalize apart? And it's the ability to ration lies to yourself, because that's what you do. You think is that you talk yourself out of things. We always rationalize why we shouldn't do something. So what we do is that small voice in our head begins to talk to us, right? Well, maybe now wouldn't be a good time. Well, maybe they won't like me. Well, maybe they'll say no. And all of a sudden, you talk yourself out. You rationalize why you shouldn't do something. And this is why you see people who don't want to write down their goals never get to where they want to get. Because a lot of it is that they're rationalizing why they can't do something. They're saying no to themselves before anybody else says no to them. And again, a lot of this has to do with a defense mechanism where we hate being rejected. But when you look at goals, the reason people don't like writing them down, Richard, is because they don't like being reminded at the end of the year of what they didn't do. Because as we know, you can't measure success unless you start measuring some type of metric that goes along with it. And a lot of people are very ambivalent about writing their goals down. That's my take on goals.
That's powerful. We're staunch believers in tracking and testing. We help a lot of different types of organizations actually test their marketing message, whether it's an advertisement, and breaking down the actual theme of whatever it is, whether it's a radio advertisement, a newspaper advertisement, or what have you. And it's interesting, having just listened to your answer on goals. They're so closely tied, because you can take an advertising message, and if you don't know what you're tracking or testing, you don't know what your results are. So, quite similarly with goals, if you're not tracking or writing down as the first step, it's definitely our ability to be in denial forever, I suppose. So that's excellent information. Okay, now I'm laughing now because I have a question that I want to ask you, and I'm definitely interested in the answer. In one of your videos, you had a person doing this hound dog sound as an exercise. I know that I'm definitely interested, but I think everybody else is probably interested what that was all about.
Okay, if you go to my website, victorgonzalez.com, you should see the video there, and it's first of all, let me not take credit for the story I'm about to tell, because I heard this salesman tell this story, this fantastic story, but I thought I'd add my spin to it, because I think that's what you should do. If you're going to use something, at least make it yours, create it differently. And we've all heard this story, and what I do in the audience is actually get some audience participation. And I'll tell you the story, and as we go through the story, I'll explain where the hound dog part comes in. And what I usually do is I call somebody from the audience and ask them to come up, and I usually ask them to make a hound dog sound. And I always talk about the Beverly Hillbillies and, that big hound dog named Duke that they had. And then I ask them to make a painful hound dog sound. So the person makes a painful hound dog sound. And then I tell the person, every time I point to you, I want you to make that sound. And then I tell them the story that I heard once. And it's about a man who's walking down a lonely road. And as he's walking down a lonely road, which he's been walking for quite a while, he's thirsty, and in the distance he sees this house. And on the house, as he approaches the house, he notices that there's an old man in a rocking chair, just rocking back and forth, very casually, while whittling a stick. And as he approaches the house and gets next to the stairs, he notices that there's this big, nasty hound dog laying right next to the old man who's just sitting there rocking. And he's making this horrible sound. It's just that, ooh, just a painful sound. And then it would stop.